Batman books for you guys this week. Before we get started, I did not pick up Batman the Knight by Chip Zdarsky. If I remember right, that one was kind of a Descartes-focused origin type situation. I'm just not as interested in that time period, so I didn't pick up issue 1. I didn't pick up issue 2 either. The other book I did not get this week, unfortunately, was Catwoman 41. They had about 58 copies of cover B, but not a single copy left of cover A when I got in at store open, which was a tad frustrating. The guy said that, cover A is prioritized for the people with a pull list. I don't have a pull list. And so more or less it was my fault that they didn't have any copies of cover A, which blows my mind because if that is how it worked, then there would be no copies of cover A ever available to pick up on the shelves. The average comic book reader isn't going to want to spend an extra $1 for every comic book from DC that they buy. Last week, I ended up with a copy of cover B for Future State Gotham, of which when I went to the shop today, they had a whole bunch of copies of cover A, and they just stuck me with cover B because I wasn't able to go in and get it, and they just didn't bother to take the time to get me the right copy. So, I don't know. I'm just annoyed with the shop this week, I guess. I'll let it go. Doesn't really matter. Long story short, I don't have Catwoman 41 right now, but I will have it. Sometime this week, I'll go to another shop and get a copy of which I'm sure there will be plenty available, and then I'll give you guys a review for that with next week's books, most likely. So that said, I've only got 4 new books for you guys this week to review. So what did I pick up? I got Nightwing Number 90. I'm excited to see Dick Grayson teaming up with Wally West here. Although, coming off of a Superman Nightwing team up, I just hope we are getting back to the actual storyline going on in Nightwing right now. Because we haven't seen much of Blockbuster or the Heartless character. We have had Nightwing kind of getting chased around the city a little bit, but there hasn't been any real meaningful developments in that storyline since really the Zucco revelation. So hoping we get it here, although with Flash on the cover, I'm a little skeptical. Of course, I picked up the trusty Detective Comics. This is issue 1057. Penultimate issue of the Tower storyline. Things really started to kick into overdrive with the last issue, so can't wait to see where things lead in this issue before the big conclusion next week. Third book I picked up, Robins 5 of 6, a book that I was pretty meh on for the first 3 issues, and then issue 4 it felt like the story was really starting to get going, so hoping they keep the momentum going with issue 5 of 6 now. They better. And then that just leaves one more book that I picked up, one that I was on the fence about grabbing because I haven't been getting the Batman-Superman team-up book while that was running. But when I saw it on the shelf today, I just couldn't resist. I did go ahead and pick up Mark Waid's World's Finest Number 1, mainly because Mark Waid and Dan Mora feel like kind of a super team. So I'm just excited to see what those two talents can bring to this book. It's been quite a while since I've been super excited about a Batman Superman team book. I think like a lot of other people, I absolutely ate up Superman Batman when that launched back in 2003, 2004 with Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness. I mean, one of the greatest runs of Batman and Superman as a team ever done, and they've just never quite gotten back there. I remember enjoying the Jay Lee Batman Superman, but I didn't really stick with it, and then I haven't really followed much since then. So this title has a lot to live up to. I hope that it holds up. So that is everything I picked up this week. I'm going to give these books a read and let you guys know what happened this week in Batman. Okay, guys. So I've read through all 4 of these books, and I'm trying to decide how I want to organize these reviews. I was really hoping to have Detective Comics not be my book of the week, just because I think it's becoming a meme at this point. And honestly, 1057 was good, but it also wasn't earth-shatteringly good. I thought that last week was amazing, and we're just at the end of the story, so at this point I'm just kind of watching things play out. There is one pretty big revelation that kind of comes at the end, I suppose, but I don't know. I just don't know how to organize these books. So I am going to just go... So there was a definitive least favorite book of the week this week, so I guess I'll get that one out of the way first here. That is going to go to Robin's 5 of 6. Um, I don't know why this book just can't click for me. I do like the concept. I think it's just needlessly complicated. So like, they're trying to find a way to balance all of these different Robins in one book. And the way they've done that is section them off and have them basically go through the same experience, just with slight variations because they're each a different Robin. So like, for example, in issue 5, the story kind of comes to a halt and each of the different Robins go through this virtual reality simulation in which they live alternate versions of their lives. And of course, each of the different Robins has a different potential version of their life in which, if they had never been Robin, their lives would have been different. Which is fine. The problem is it just feels like a lot of disparate storytelling, and you spend the first half of the book kind of getting through that gauntlet, only for them to kind of all match up and be like, well, one thing we've learned is we're all friends because we're all Robin, and now let's start the story. And that's literally the middle. You can see the paper clips right here in the middle of the book. That's when that happens in this story. And so I just find the pacing of the writing on this to be all over the map. One of the things that issue 4 had going for it was I didn't find the dialogue to be extremely annoying. Some of the quippiness of the first 3 issues was toned down, or at least just better done. I still feel that way about issue 5, but the way Batman is written, for some reason, just isn't working for me in this issue. So I don't know. I thought it was weird having Batman so heavily included in this issue, with it being a Robin's title. We're supposed to be getting down to business and it's supposed to be about the Robins, and it just feels like they kind of ended up getting sidelined to inject Batman into this and have this final showdown with this original Robin, quote unquote. My money is still on the idea that this person was never actually Robin. They're just the victim of a delusion brought on by this whole VR setup that has been needlessly injected into the plot. I guess if that's not what's going on, why in the world did that have to be the plot of this? Like, I don't know. It's just not working for me. Hate to say it. Robin's issue 5, despite a little bit of an uptick in issue 4, just kind of settled back into its usual grind where, you spend a lot of time with each of the Robins individually, and then they come back together and express that they've learned some kind of lesson about themselves, and then rinse, repeat. I think if Detective Comics has taught us anything over the last several issues, it's that, the Batman supporting cast can work great as a team if they all have a unique thing to contribute to the story, and the actions they take actually forward the momentum of the narrative. Robin's, unfortunately, is doing exactly the opposite, and it remains towards the bottom of my list, even in this penultimate issue, unfortunately. And so, speaking of Detective Comics, because I always talk about that book at the end of these videos, because it's always my favorite, I'm going to go ahead and interject it right here. Let's talk about Detective Comics 1057. Because if Robin's was definitively my least favorite, Detective was definitively my favorite, again. Like, I'm excited for this storyline to wrap up so I can start singing the praises of something else. But man, this title just continues to be killing it. Now, as I said earlier, it's not quite as strong as the last issue, mainly because, we're in wrap-up land now. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of waiting to find out what happens to everybody. There's a lot of punching and conflict. In this issue, Batman takes back the tower. Which maybe is part of why I enjoyed this issue a little bit less too, is, very heavily featuring Batman in this, whereas I was really enjoying focusing on the supporting cast and less on Batman himself. But that said, there's a certain amount of exhilaration to be had by, seeing everyone teaming up together in the tower, making their way floor by floor, and, taking it back for the city of Gotham. I thought that was fun in concept. Let down a little bit in execution. I think that for some reason the narrative just felt a little bit muddled in terms of like the geography of it. With 12 issues to set this whole thing up, they probably could have done a better job walking you through, every floor of Arkham Tower and, what makes each of those floors unique so then you could see them, take the tower back, a la The Raid. Like, I would love to see the conclusion of this book be like The Raid or something like that. But instead, it's a little bit more montagey, which is fine. Like, it's nothing wrong with it, just not necessarily mind-blowing. As I'm leafing through it, you can tell who's front and center. Not loving the illustration of Batman in this, by the way, either. The true highlight of this book has to be Scarecrow and Psycho Pirate and the fight for Psycho Pirate's mask, which Scarecrow takes, but then ends up on the floor. Everyone's fighting for it, and a somewhat unexpected character actually ends up with it. And I don't want to spoil that because definitely has some interesting potential repercussions for future issues that I'm excited to see where they go with. Certainly left me excited for the final issue in this story. And similarly so, House of Gotham. We are now also on chapter 11. It promises to conclude next week. And another great ride, but again, sort of overly reliant on Batman for a narrative that has not been Batman focused up to this point. This is actually very much Batman forward. We've now skipped past Batman No Man's Land, and we're now in the era of Jason Todd as Red Hood, very close to modern times here. We get to see that little boy all grown up now. He has a family of his own, and Batman has now come to crash the party on his family, the same as had been done to his father before him. I think despite that plot point maybe feeling a little bit predictable, it was still very satisfying. And at the conclusion of this issue, we see the Bat family going into Gotham's underground, where this orphan has supposedly been smuggling people under the city, and it's not quite clear what it is he's really up to. Joker is still floating around in this, promising to make an appearance at the end. I think that it's going to be interesting to see what the final 8 or so pages of this has in store for us. I certainly have some ideas. I think Batman is probably going to be put in his place at the end of this, but we'll just have to wait another week to find out. So that just leaves me with these last 2 books that I don't quite know what to do with. Which one was better? Which one was worse? Neither of them were perfect, and it was kind of like for opposite reasons. And so that's maybe why I'm having so much trouble deciding. I think, though, I've got to give the edge to World's Finest as my second favorite book of the week. And I think the reason for that probably just boils down to the art. I really like Dan Mora on art. I miss him on Detective, and so having him here is just a breath of fresh air. I think the interesting thing about Dan Mora's artwork is, depending on who's doing the coloring, it really changes your impression of what the art looks like. So I just found this book to be fascinating to look at overall. Because this is a color palette that's somewhere halfway between what we saw from him in Detective Comics and what he's doing in Once and Future. It doesn't quite have that neon Technicolor element that Once and Future sometimes has, but it definitely is working in a lighter color palette with just a hint of pastel, just very different. I haven't actually quite decided if the colors in this work or not, because it looks almost Easter to me. I guess I don't know how else to describe it. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this. As far as the story goes, if I'm being completely honest, I was a little disappointed. I mean, if you're a Doom Patrol fan, this has got the Doom Patrol in it. There is a ton of classic DC references and nuggets to be had in this. But the problem I had with that is it kind of drowns out the Batman Superman element of this story. One of the things that Jeff Loeb did so well was clearly defining how those two characters were independently, how they interacted together, and a lot of the drama and the storytelling came from them negotiating with each other, how to problem solve whatever given story it was that they were involved in. This feels a little bit more like DC Skittle Vomit, where it's just throw every concept at the wall. It's just a massive who's who of the DC universe, in which, Batman, Superman are kind of hosting the event more so than really driving the narrative necessarily. And part of the problem is they introduce so many different characters in here and hallucinations of other characters in here that I don't even really know what this story is about. And so it's one of those where it's going to have to maybe wait for issue 2 before I can really give a verdict on issue 1. Because now hopefully we'll have the chance to kind of slow things down. There were some interesting parallels in this To that original Jeff Loeb Batman Superman run. Metallo's featured in this. He ends up shooting Superman with a red kryptonite syringe, whereas in Superman Batman, in the very first issue or second issue, he ends up shooting him with a kryptonite bullet, if I remember right. And so I thought that was just kind of an interesting, maybe a nod, not really sure. It led to probably the most interesting aspects of the book, which boiled down to, what does red kryptonite do to Superman? It mutates him, and we see all kinds of really cool, interesting things happening to Superman that feel like classic comic book Superman to me. That was where the book really shined the most. Batman was just kind of serious face through the whole thing. Nothing super interesting. So we'll just have to wait and see with issue 2. It's worth it for the art, in my opinion. So I will pick up issue 2 and give you my thoughts on it. And we'll see how Mark Waid develops this story as we move forward. So that just leaves us with one last review, which is Nightwing 90. Kind of weird placement because this is a book that's sort of right in the middle, but I'm reviewing it last. But I guess, what's the harm in that? There's only 9 million episodes of This Week in Batman. I can mess it up once in a while, right? Now, there are ultimately 2 reasons why I gave it to World's Finest over Nightwing this week. But know that I did enjoy Nightwing a lot. It just wasn't as strong as I think it probably should have been. Part of that's going to boil down to the art. We have a fill-in artist on this who, in all honesty, does a serviceable job. There's nothing really wrong with the art. It's just that I find that Bruno Redondo is just perfect for this book. And as a matter of fact, as much as I like Tom Taylor, I think Bruno Redondo is what I respond to the most when I read Nightwing, because as we're going through the story, that kind of gets me to the second ding in this book, which is it's lacking. We had a really strong outing at the beginning of his Nightwing run. We introduced Heartless, we introduced, is it Miranda Zucco, I believe? I can't remember her first name. It's been so long since we've seen her. We set up a great concept for Nightwing in which he's trying to become, a public-facing philanthropist while still being Nightwing. So many interesting plot developments and story beats. And then everything just kind of derailed after Fear State. He spent a bunch of time with Oracle trying to figure out what the deal was with the Anti-Oracle, if I remember. That was the main gist of Nightwing at the time. And then we got into this Get Grayson story, which this is now Act 3, so we had a month pause, and then now we're back into that prior story arc. But really, this has just been Blockbuster trying to kill Dick Grayson. Like, that's literally it. Which, is fine, but it feels like we're really killing time. Like, there's no real revelations, there's no real forward momentum. It's just been, Dick Grayson is in a bind because Blockbuster wants to kill him. Rinse, repeat. Like, that's really what the last couple issues of this Get Grayson storyline have felt like. And it hasn't even felt like there's been a forward progression in Blockbuster's plan. It was nice seeing Nightwing and Wally West together. A lot of great stuff going on there. Tom Taylor does a good job writing Nightwing as a general role, and it's not bad here. I just want to see this story start to kick into high gear. I don't want this to become another The Joker, where we just kind of keep circling the drain of the same good ideas until all the goodwill kind of drains out of it. So, hoping they can turn it around. I'm sure that they will. I'll be very happy when Bruno Redondo's back, because I guess I'm really discovering that I'm just really into his artwork right now, and no one else is quite scratching that. Okay, so to recap my reads for you guys this week, because this was a very weirdly formatted video, and thanks to you guys who stuck around to find out my full thoughts on what happened this week in Batman. But to sum up, my books organized least favorite to most favorite overall have to go to Robin's at the bottom, Nightwing, second from the bottom, but a good read, World's Finest, second favorite book of the week, but a razor's edge better than Nightwing. And then a solid, but not absolutely jaw-dropping outing from Batman Detective Comics with issue 1057. So, if you guys picked up any of these books, let me know what you guys thought of them down in the comments below. Especially curious to know what you guys thought of World's Finest, because it was all over the map for me. But that art, Dan Mora, good stuff. So, time for me to get out of here. I hope you guys have a great week in comics, and thanks for watching this video.